几岁来叫他来结婚，拿到在这我能稳没这一些呢，那种跟着吃饭啊，跟我吃噻，就他困好，帮我吹好，都能我的接回来，好，一些一点没得嘞。
Yes, we were a very musical family. We were all into music. My father played the violin beautiful and my mother played the piano. And there was always music in our life, you know. And yeah, we loved dancing and lovely games, you know, as children, you know, in the garden and at birthday parties. It was really lovely.
우리 아버지가 술을 좋아합니다. 그래 나를 불러서 가서 전복을 좀 잡아오너라, 해삼을 좀 잡아오너라. 그래서 내가 그 조락을 들고 그 전복 따는 칼을 가지고 바다에 들어가 전복 해삼 따다가 아버지 술 안주할 때 그때 그 마음은 어디다 비할 수 없이 그렇게 기쁩니다.
Takakaku kagiak kiba simsino chinki adura chocho kiba uwa uduru uyasima dahil kung hindi dyan sa kantang yan hindi ako mapapasali doon sa hindi ako iniisip ko na baka hindi ako nahuli ng hapon dahil lang doon sabi ko kaya minsan na iisip ko. Pero nakaraan na ako, baliwala na sa akin. Kaya lang pagka nalaala ko, napapaiyak ako.
Ako ay 15 to 16 lang edad ko. Nangyari na sa akin yung ganyan ng paghahasa sa akin kanapon. Simula noon hanggang ngayon, ang galit ko sa hapon, hindi naaalis.
She visits this little sanctuary every day. Praying is a long-lived habit of hers. As a young girl, she yearned to become a nun. Jan var förhånd. Her wish, however, never came true. In 1942, Jan and her Dutch family were living happily in Java, Indonesia, then the Dutch colony, running a sugarcane farm. Yet everything changed when the Japanese army occupied Java.
And we were all trucked away on this truck and taken to prison camp. It was an end of an era. That was the end of the Dutch colonial era. It was the end of an era for my youth, for my whole life ended there.
All foreigners in Indonesia were divided by gender and confined in concentration camps. The days of torment began. Many of them died of disease and starvation. Then, one day, a Japanese army came to the women's camp and issued a most extraordinary order.
They said that all the girls from 17 years had to stand in the compound and line up. You know, after they up and down, they used to look at our face, at our legs, you know, at our figure, and then they chose the 10 prettiest girls. I was one of the 10 that we were left standing there in the end.
The girls were loaded up in a truck and taken somewhere. Yet there was no one to explain where they were going or what they were going to do.
국민 서군 이치다이 계획이 되어리마시 조금도 조금이 마고토니 계획이 자연적으로 되어리마시.
Late 19th century, Japan was the first Asian country that adopted the Western industrial civilization. In the early 20th century, Japan began the path of militarism by igniting the Russia-Japan War and Manchurian Incident and colonized Taiwan and Korea. In 1937, they also initiated the China-Japan War. The Japanese ambition did not end there. In 1940, Japan secured a military alliance with Germany and Italy and soon initiated the Pacific War. The war, claiming tens of millions of lives, ended with the Japanese surrender in 1945. The war was especially brutal on women. 63 years and on since the war ended, there are people who are suffering today just the same from the nightmares of that war. It was 1942 when a Japanese army appeared in a small beach town called Masbate, Philippines. The occupying troops taught the children here Japanese songs.
O sehero o nasago mo ni Sobiyoro hojino satakuso Kimu uyutiko yoroginaki wagani puno okorinare. I'm only grade 2 at that time. Kinakanta nilang Miyo to Ukay no Sorakete. Karoon nga ng welcome party ng mga Hapon. Isa ako sa nasali sa programa. Kakantahin ko yung Mini Yuto Ukay no Sorakete. May pumunta sa akin na sa amin na 2 sundalong Hapon. Pinakukuha ko. Sabi ng teacher ko, sumama daw ako dahil sa likod lang naman ang eskwelahan. So, hindi ako, sumama naman ako dahil lagi naman pinupunta namin yung lugar na yun. So, pagdating ko doon, kasi hapon na, medyo hanap ko yung kasing edad ko, wala. Di gusto ko nang bumalik. Ang ginawa, hinawakan na ako at medyo itinulak na ako doon sa loob ng kwarto. May maliit na kwarto doon. Doon ako pinasok at sinarado na.
15-year-old Frias saw the Japanese army for the first time while she was doing laundry with her aunt.
Maya-maya, mga 10 o'clock in the morning, dumating sa amin ang 5 hapon. Hindi ako naimik dahil hindi ko nga alam kung ano sasagot ko doon. Ang ginawa ng hapon, pinasok ako dyan ng sigarilyo dito sa mukha, 2 beses. Ngayon ako'y sumigaw. Pag sigaw kong ito, ang ginawa niya sa akin, kinuha niya dito ang kanyang jungle knife at saka ako'y sinaksak niya ako dito. Kaya ito nagwang ko yan nagayan niya. Di matagal na akong kakuha, wala na yung gagos na dugo, wala na. Di ang ginawa naman sa akin kanhapon, talian ako dito sa kuwan, tinalian ako sa kamay, dinala ako doon sa malayo, sa puno, kan langka, doon ako tinali. Itali niya ako doon, yun ako nirip na kang 2 hapon.
In 1944, most of the villages in town escaped to mountains when the Japanese army arrived here. Yet Wei Xiaolan, who failed to run because of her infant child, was caught by the Japanese soldiers.
Nó quay trở lại đó, tôi mới chẳng thoát đến trẻ, thì cái này thọ ra khởi, tạo ra cái khởi ra vải thầu, ma đu vải thầu, sáng là chế là đồ sở về đồ vải thầu, do thằng đồ xuống có phụ huynh, ông sáng chế mấy cái, tôi đã mấy cái đi,有两个phụ huynh sáng chế. Từ khi chỉ rằng là
Lee Susan was living in a village near the southern coast of Korea, then a Japanese colony. An eldest daughter of a poor family, she was lured by a Japanese, saying that working in a textile factory would earn her a handsome wage. She got on a military train bound to China, together with the 7 other young girls.
저녁에 끔끔하니까네 일본놈이 군대가 둘이 왔어요. 거기서 이래 골려보고 나는 인물이 제일 못나서요. 그 안에서. 근데 인물 좀 뺀드럭한 거 골려서 데리고 갔다가 가들이 와서 울고 불고 그날이 행피는 없었어요. 그래 가서 그것들에게 모욕을 당했지요. 그렇게 하고 그놈들이 모욕을 하는 데는 그 안에 있는 놈들이 다 그렇게 강간을 하더래요.
The truck stopped in front of a large house. You know, we were in a brothel. We found ourselves in a brothel. We were for the pleasure of the military to have sex with us. The first night and what happened then has tortured my mind for the rest of my life. My life would never be the same again after that first night, and you never lose the memory, because this is your first experience of sex, you know, something that is supposed to be so beautiful, and it is the most horrible thing that you could imagine.
May dumating na 5. Binuksan ang pintuan, masok yung 5, sabay sampal. Nawala na ako ng malay. Yun, nag-umpisa na sila ng mag-rep sa akin. Pagdating ng 3 tao, doon ako na natauhan na nire-rep nga ako. Doon ko nalaan na nire-rep. Doon ko palang naranasan yung una-unang ganun pala yun. Kaya ako nag-iiyak at nagsisisigaw pa. Sabi, hanggang sa lumabas sila, nagtatawanan.
A torn-down and deserted farmhouse in the Guilin region, China, is the building where the Japanese army was based during the wartime, and Wei Xiaolan was taken to.
quay dọa là chỉ qua là thầu trắng có bị mình có giàu như nhìn số và trò chẳng để thông đấy là những người như mấy thằng đã rất hổ ta chịu khỏi chẳng là hơn nặng cũ nó có nàng cũ nó có những cái gì sang khi từ liên sản qua hệ sống nó có cho cái làng ngôn để trọng phụ phải chính là đi sản xuất của đấy để canh công mình hồi lại以前干一般干是吧
The place was where Wei Xiaolan and the ladies appearing in this documentary were taken to a long time ago. It was a place called Comfort Station for the Japanese troops. The comfort stations were various in forms. They had, however, a single objective. It was to maintain the troops' combat efficiency at its best by discouraging the defiant spirit and anti-Japan sentiment in occupied lands, and preventing random rapes while protecting the troops from venereal diseases at the same time.
那么1918年到1921年期间呢，当时日军出兵西伯利亚，进攻就是苏俄。在这个过程当中呢，一共有7个师团的日军参加了这个战斗。战争结束以后，日军发现有整整1个师团的官兵患了性病，所以那个事件发生以后，日军一直在考虑怎么防止这种性病的蔓延。那么他不是从严肃军纪的角度去考虑这个问题，去解决这个问题，而是就是怎么为军队提供一个健康的所谓能够保护军队的这样一个性的服务制度。那么这样就是慰安婦制度就開始出現。
第1位はですね、戦争が始まって戦地占領地に派遣された日本の軍人が、中国その他で非常にたくさんの強姦事件を起こすんですね。でそれに非常に困って、それを防ぐ一つの手段として慰安所という慰安所を作り、兵士に女性を斡旋すれば、強姦事件がなくなるんではないかというふうに考えたんですね。
They wanted to set up comfort stations so that their soldiers would not go raping and pillaging in the villages, but instead of doing that, they systematically kidnapped and raped these women as a government policy.
As the battle lines expanded, the number of comfort stations grew as well. Anywhere from China, Southeast Asian countries, to small islands of the Pacific, they set up comfort stations wherever the Japanese troops set foot in. It is estimated at a few thousands or more. Most of the women were from Korea and Taiwan, the Japanese colonies. Any women from any occupied lands, however, also risked being taken as comfort women any time. The recruitment, transportation and placement of the comfort women were based on the military command, their plans and approvals.
They were moved along with the military units. When the military units had to move to different fronts, they moved in military ships, equipments, trucks, etc. It was a part of the Japanese Army military field operation.
全体の、人数ですね、どれぐらいの女性が慰安婦にさせられたかというのははっきりとはありませんが、少なくとも十数万から20万人ぐらいというのが大体大きな研究の成果です。現地で拉致された女性たちが例えば何ヶ月か監禁されて、ほとんどもう監禁されてレイプをされたという状態ですけれども、そういう女性たちも特にたくさんいます。
At the end of the war, the Japanese troops would bring their comfort women along for rapes. Frias was repeatedly raped in jungles for months, while the Japanese army was in guerrilla cleanup operation.
Ngayon ang ginawa naman nung kuwan, ilinatag nila ang lona doon sa damuhan at doon kami pinahiga ng mga 4 kami babae na may mga tali kami dito. Hindi man kami pinakuan, hindi kami hiwa-hiwalay, nakatali lang kami, nakahiga kami. Yun, yung gabi na yun, ang nag-rip sa akin na hapon ay gayaan. Yung gabi na yun. Pag-aalis kang hapon, isasama kami. Pagbabalik, kasama naman kami doon na naman kami sa kampo na yung guerrilla. Pagkakagabi nire-rip kami kan mga hapon na yan.
Mudanjiang is located northeast of China. In 1944, many young Korean girls, together with the Li Susan, were brought here after 3 days and nights of train ride. In Mudanjiang, there were at least 3 comfort stations. Lee-Susan was placed at the comfort station number 3.
목단강 전기정이 한 벌판에 집만 하나 이래 있습니다. 그때는 너리라 해서 너리니까네 일본 군대가 모으는 그 마차에다 우리를 실어서 그 이 학고방에다 갖다가 넣어라 줍니다. 그래 넣어라 주니 우리는 그 7이가 이런 데로 와서는 어찌는가 하고 그 안에도 보니까네 자아들이 부질부질한 게.
Lee-Susan had to live here for 2 years till the war ended. Including her, there were several dozen comfort women here. After the war, the comfort station was converted to a factory and there is not a single trace of it now. Yet the memory of the life as a sexual slave here in a prison-like hut is very vivid.
담은 얼마 높은가 하면 사람 2길은 가게 그래 높게. 그 외에다가는 1m 반 되는 그런 난그 꼬재 이래 세워놨는데 거기다는 이런 저 하얀 저 전기통 하나 똥단지를 이래 달아놨습니다. 그래 낮이고 밤이고 그 전기와 있습니다. 그거가 쥐기만 하면 죽습니다. 전기에 붙어주고.
Comfort stations were operated directly by the military or entrusted to civilian management. Some stations were inside the military base and some out in the village. Yet the ultimate responsibility of the most stations was in the hands of the military itself.
From the first day we arrived, the whole house was set up to function as a brothel. A reception area, our photographs were taken and they were put on a pin-up board. And they gave us Japanese names, and the names were put under the photos so that the Japanese could pick the girl that they wanted.
문 앞에다 이래 표말을 이래 해놨어요. 그걸 뒤집어 놓으면 들어오고 엎어 놓으면 그 방을 안 들어옵니다. 그런데 이래 문을 열고 이래 보면 줄을 섰어요. 한 10명씩 넘어 되게.
They provided the soldiers with condoms. The name of the condom was a military term called Doshikeki Ichiban, meaning assault number 1. They also distributed disinfectant to apply on the genital area before and after the intercourse. The military provided all these items. This is their place of residence, reconstructed based on the testimonies of former comfort women. In this cramped space, they had to receive dozens of Japanese soldiers each day, from morning to night. The military's major focus was the management of the venereal disease prevention. The women were required to receive periodic examination from the military doctors. When she saw the dispatched doctors for exam, Jan had a glimpse of hope.
I thought, oh, a doctor is coming. I thought, good, because he would be an honorable man, you know. He would understand, you know. And he left the door wide open, and there was windows there, and he said to the Japanese, oh, you can all come and have a look while the girls were being examined. I mean, the humiliation, can you imagine the humiliation?
The doctor did not stop there. He passed a treacherous smile. Though Jan tried to run for life, it was no use.
And the doctor raped me. He was dragged to the bedroom and he raped me. And from then onwards, every time the doctor came to visit us, he raped me first. Now, and that is a doctor.
Many soldiers did not bother to use condoms. and many women would get pregnant. Lee-Susan was one of them.
내가 임신을 했습니다. 은혜를 척그덕까지 했어요. 아가 되겠다고 또 한바탕 되게 맞았어요. 날 때리며 물어봅니다. 아는 어떻게 하겠는가 그래. 고향을 보내달라고 나는 집을 가겠다고. 그래 내가 이걸 책임지고 날 여비매 보내달라고 하니까 또 때리고 욕하고 귀통치고 발질로 너리 차서 배를 차서 지우라는 것도 안 지워져요. 한 2달 넘어 3달 됐는데 토하고 먹지 못하고 행편없지요. 내가 얼굴이가 막. 그런데도 군대는 계속 들이보냅니다.
They forced her to have an artificial abortion.
그건 육군 군대 병원이야. 그에 가서는 몸 주사 놓고 내 자궁 다 끊었어요. 아처럼 막 다 끊어냈어요. 다시는 알을 못 가지게.
Finding it unbearable, Lee-Susan attempted to escape. Unfamiliar with the surrounding, however, she was fast caught and tortured in inconceivable ways.
내 가슴이 여기 위에 아래 너무 뜨거워가지고 엎드니까 이게 궁디도 다 험이라요. 윤두짜리 일본 윤두 있잖아요. 그걸로 막 뒤집디다. 화리또에 절가치를 가지고 이거 다 이래 주인이 막 사람이 막 이게 막 비틀어져요. 얼마나 아픈지. 내 몸에는 전체가 일본 놈이 윤두짜리라요.
Wei Xiaolan, too, was looking for a chance to escape.
Đối với hồ cô một cái nào, bây giờ cô nào, trời can sâu là khả năng của Thái阳, hơn là cô này chính thầu,东西投黄，我从我这把几块，把这笼子进去可以吧？把这个笼子去拿回头啊！太阳全部都到那个太阳州了。
It was a life-risking escape. With some residents' help, she actually did escape.
花干不去，苦一年我了我，苦蛮苦，同埋苦了这个，没苦了，帮没下来。 chỉ đến chủ đấy không? Đến đến chủ cái máy chỉ đến chủ chẳng nó còn chẳng là xem có phần như mấy sao khỏe về sao khỏe là hao rồi chứ.
Reyes's health fast deteriorated at the comfort station. She was lucky, for the Japanese army had no choice but to release her.
Ang gusto nila, ihahatid pa ako dahil nga may sakit ako. Sabi ko, no, ako na lang mag-isa. Sige, nangangayapit na lang ako dahil mahina talaga na ako. Hindi ko na palos makaya. Pero ayaw ko magpahatid dahil natatakot ako sa kanila.
Every night, when the last customer would have gone, I would go on my knees and I would pray to God. And I would pray the prayer that Jesus said when he was hanging on the cross. He said, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. And that was the prayer that kept me going.
Pag dumating ang mga eroplano, ang daming eroplano. Ang akala namin kampo ng eroplano ng mga Hapon. Yung pala ay hindi eroplano ng Amerika. Ngayon sila ay naguhulog ng mga papel. Na sabi nila, yung daw yung mga Hapon na nanditong mga sundalo ay dapat umuwi na sila. Doon mag-uwi na sa Japan. Yun. Ginawa kang mga Hapon nung mabasa na nila yun. Yun ang umalis na sila doon sa kampo. Maigi naman ang pag-alis nila doon, hindi kami pinatay. Iniwanan na lang kami doon sa kuwan, kami ay nakatali na 4. Inawanan kami sa kampo kang gerilya.
The war was over. With the Japan surrender, the women were released from the horrifying comfort stations. A great number of women, however, were killed by the Allied forces' bombing or by the retreating Japanese troops. Though those caught locally were able to go home, those women recruited from the colonies, Korea and Taiwan, were simply deserted in foreign lands.
특히 우리나라 위안부가 비극적인 것은 외국으로 배 타고 그리 옮겨졌거든요. 그러니까는 패전을 거기에서 맞은 다음에 뭐 필리핀 같은 데 가면 영어도 모르고 타갈로그도 모르고 중국말도 모르고 아무 말도 모르니까 근데 거기에 그냥 버려진 거예요.
After the war, a Tokyo War Crime Tribunal was held. The trial, however, did not address the issues regarding comfort women. It was all about compensations for the Allied nations, and the punishable category was at its minimum. The court sentenced Commander Hideki Dozo and 6 officers to death, but none of the charges included the comfort women issue. America, who actually led the trial, avoided the issue intentionally.
당시 아시아에 중국과 러시아가 있었기 때문에 아시아 여러 나라들의 그런 공산주의 도미노 현상이 일어날까봐 미국이 일본을 그 아시아에서의 자본주의의 그 기둥이라고 그럴까요? 우산이라고 그럴까요? 그렇게 다시 세우려고 굉장히 노력을 했던 것 같습니다. 그러니까 이제 그 전쟁 범죄에 대해서는 아주 관대해졌던 거죠.
The comfort women issue, therefore, was buried deep for a long time. All women released from the life of a sexual slavery remained silent, for their ordeal was a disgraceful experience. They buried their rage and rancor deep in their hearts. Much time has passed, yet the nightmare of the war has never stopped for those who were taken as comfort women for the Japanese army. No one claimed the responsibility for the broken youth and agony. Past was the fetter still oppressing their lives. They were far beyond social interest, and they had to live as prisoners confined to their own wounds.
끌려간 여자들이 되게 어리거든요. 그러니까 벼랑간에 당할 때에 수치심이 굉장한데 남자들한테 당하다 보니까는 자기 자신에 대한 혐오감과 수치심과 이 기감, 이거 말로 할 수 없는 이런 게 있는데 이게 끝내 풀리지를 않는 거예요.
慰安婦の被害というのは戦時下だけではなく戦後日本政府も沈黙し社会も沈黙しそして女性たちがその被害を恥ずかしいこととして自分の中に秘めていたその長い戦後も女性たちにとっては被害の連続であったと解決されない戦争が終わっていないその歳月であったということもまた考えてほしいなと思っています。
After the war, Lee Susan could not go back to her homeland, Korea. With nothing, she wandered about the vast China. She was lucky to meet a good man.
돈이 없으니 밥도 하고 빨래도 하고 청소도 하니 그 목지에서 날아온 사람들이 밥 먹을 데 없어 여관에 와 밥 사 먹으면 나를 보고 여자들이 그때 5인가 거기서 나온 여자가 일했는데도 우리 신랑제가 나는 제일 인물이 없는데 기운이 세게 생겼다며 나를 선출했어요.
Her husband was compassionate and understanding of her past. Since she was unable to conceive a child, they adopted a son, She raised him to be successful and now had a sweet home. Yet she could never share her past with her family or go back home in Korea for 50 years. Frias too got married after the war, yet her marriage ended in no time. Her past service in the Japanese army was the cause.
1949, nag-asawa ako. Ngayon, after 1 year, I'm already separated. Because, dahil, naalaman niya na, ako daw, I'm not virgin anymore. Because, dahil yung kanyang kamag-anak, ka-eskwela ko nung grade 5 kami, yun ang nakaalam na ako ay kinuha ng Hapon.
Jan came back to her beloved family after the Japanese defeat. Yet she could no longer become a nun as she had always dreamed. Instead, she met Tom, a British military officer, and fell in love with him. Soon, they married and moved to Australia. Jan seemed to have finally regained happiness in life. Yet her past never could be deleted, not even with all that time passed.
And I can honestly tell you that I have never been able to enjoy sexual intercourse, not even with my husband. I loved him, and we had sex, but I could never enjoy it, because all that I could see again was, especially that first night, it would, as soon as my husband would make love, that scene would come back. And I think this is a terrible thing for a woman, and I think most of the comfort women would probably have the same experience.
Wei Xiaolan was lucky enough to escape, but she was with the child of a Japanese soldier. She gave birth to a boy 7 months after her escape. Her husband soon began abusing her and the baby.
Thành dân bữa mà đấy tụi cô đi ăn mỗi dân thành dân có mấy xây được ta chữ dân như thế nào.
Lo Shanshe, born with the Japanese blood, is now an old man over 60. All his life, he had to live with the same trauma and nightmare as his mother has had. He is still single, for no one would give him his daughter.
As soon as it was getting dark, we knew it would start. Fear all comes over your body, your whole body just, oh God, it's going to start again, and you're all fearful, and you hear them coming, you know. Sometimes when it's getting dark at night and I draw the curtains and I see it's getting dark, I get that funny feeling coming over me again of total fear.
50년 전 일본군에 끌려가서 위안부 생활을 강요당했던 한 할머니가 그동안의 수치심을 딛고 일제의 만행을 고발했습니다.
16살 조건 넘은 것을 끌고 가서 강제로 울고서 안 당하려고 막 쫓아나오면 붙잡고 안 놔줘요. 이놈의 새끼가, 일본 놈의 새끼가, 군인 놈의 새끼가. 그래서 할 수 없이 울면서 당해요. 죽기 전에 내 눈 감기 생전에 한번 분풀이 꼭 마을에도 분풀이 하고 싶어요.
One voice broke the long silence after a half century.
그리고 그 반향은 아주 대단했습니다. 그동안 오랫동안 접수센터를 만들어 놨지만은 아무도 연락이 없었는데 그 뒤에 계속적으로 한 분씩 연락들이 오셔갖고 거의 한 100명 가까이가 몇 달 안에 금방 채워질 정도가 됐습니다. 그리고 그렇게 들어오신 할머니들한테 어떻게 알고 접수를 하시게 됐습니까? 하고 말씀을 여쭤보면은 모두 한결같이 김학순 할머니 정언을 텔레비전에 보고 갑자기 그동안 이 가슴 속에 꼭꼭 묻고 있었던 자기의 그 아주 어릴 적의 상처를 가진 꽃 같은 사람이 나와서 얘기를 하는 것을 보고 너무나 충격을 받고 고민을 하고
이런 것을 돈으로 보상되겠어요. 나 도로지 17살 때로 돌려주세요.
Kim Hak-soon, she was the first one to speak out, and I saw on this very television, I saw just this little group of few South Korean women. And when I saw those women, I thought, now is the time to speak. Now I've got to speak. I've got to back them up, because as a European voice, European woman, it sounds terrible to say, but I thought the world might listen more to me.
Jan followed Kim Hak-soon and became the first European accuser. Finally, the comfort women issue that had been buried for 50 years surfaced in front of the world, and a movement urging the Japanese apology began. The voices were bursting everywhere, demanding the truth.
And the amazing thing is, this is why we're all sisters in our suffering. At the same time, after 50 years, every comfort woman kept quiet. After 50 years, bang, all of a sudden, the time was right to speak out.
The testimonies of the victims continued one after another. Academic seminars and collective actions by the Comfort Women organizations grew vigorous in international arena. Such efforts at last moved the UN. In 1998, the UN adopted a special report called the McDougall Report. The report revealed clearly that the Comfort Women were victims of a systematic rape and sexual slaves.
In some way, through the work that I had done, the international community had taken note of what had happened to them, and that they were true atrocities.
Post-war Germany, with the most horrendous crimes in its history, made the right choice. Japan, on the other hand, has actively promoted historical amnesia. The continued efforts by some in Japan to distort and deny history and play a game of blame the victim are nauseating.
In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The resolution is agreed.
July 30th, 2007, the U.S. House of Representatives passed 1-to-1 resolution with one accord, urging the Japanese apology for the Comfort Women issue.
Resolution 121 clearly states what is expected of the Japanese government, and that is to apologize unambiguously and clearly, and accepting historical responsibility for what had happened during the 1930s and during World War II relative to the development of the Comfort Women station system.
The 1-to-1 resolution inspired many Asian Comfort women in demanding Japan's truthful apology. It also triggered the EU and Canadian parliaments to pass resolutions of same nature.
There is a one-to-one resolution passed at the U.S. Congress. Japanese government should fully recognize that there is an awareness, no? There is an awareness, and the international is trying to find means and ways to resolve this issue.
Despite the one-to-one resolution, however, Japan is responding with no significant gesture. The next day, Japanese newspapers indicated that the Japanese government ordered a silence among its officials. They urged to restrain comments on the resolution for the sake of its U.S. relations, though they may not acknowledge it. In editorials, however, Japan was explicitly criticizing the resolution, saying it was clearly a wrong judgment. They were also repeating their old claim how there was no proven record for the forced recruitment of comfort women. Former comfort women are outraged at the Japanese attitude of such. Lee Susan, who kept her past from her family to this date, stood before the camera for that reason.
인터뷰 안 하신다고 그랬었잖아요. 하시기로 마음 바꾸시게 된 이유가 뭐예요?
나는 일본님이 강제로 우리 조선 여성들을 붙잡아 간 일이 없다 하길래 내 너무 분해서 하는 기라요. 촬영하세요. 내가 안 죽도 살아 있는데.
Japan is ignoring the testimonies of the victims with official claim that no records proving the forced recruitment exist. Yet a document recently discovered in Holland clearly shows that the Japanese Special Naval Police called Tokei Tai kidnapped many women by force on the streets of Java, Indonesia in 1943 to supply women to comfort stations. What is more serious is that the Japanese government recently jumped on the rightist, trying to wipe the existence of comfort women itself off the history.
2006年度版教科書、ここからはこの記述なしというのがたくさん増えてます。そして今使っている教科書に残っているのが、関連記述は2社のみです。しかしこの関連記述としても、例えば1社は慰安所という言葉ではなく慰安施設という言葉であったり、慰安婦という言葉はもう消えてなくなったり、あるいはこの慰安婦問題について、きちんとこう説明するというようなことはもうできなくなっているわけで、そういった意味では非常に今日本の子どもたちが慰安婦問題を教えられる学ぶ機会というのは大変もう激減していると。
The Japanese attitude on comfort women is either the same or getting worse. CNN conducted a poll last year on whether Japan should apologize again for its war to military brothels. 74% said no. Has Japan ever apologized? If so, what sort of apology?
大臣として心から同情をいたしておりますし、またそういう状況に置かれていたということに対して申し訳ない思いでございます。
Hindi pwede na maghingi siya doon dahil hindi yun ang biktima. Kami ang biktima dahil dito siya sa amin maghingi.
I accept Prime Minister's apology.
God, George Bush. The stupid apology of Mr. Shinzo Abe, he accepted it.
Despite the Japanese government's several apologies, comfort women still demanded, for they were artificial, with no truthfulness.
女性度は制度冷静だっていうふうに言うほかないと思うんですが、そういうものを作ったのは主体は日本軍であるということをはっきり認めることが必要だと思うんですね。 そして法的責任を認めて、明確な謝罪をすると。それから被害者に対してですね、賠償をするというそういう手続きがやっぱり必要だと思うんですね。
ですから改めて政府として日本政府としてあるいは日本の国会として正式に全ての被害者に対する謝罪をやる必要があると思っています。
And I think very importantly to change the school books, the history books used in Japanese schools, so that they accurately reflect what happened. And that, I think, is a critically important piece of this, so that future generations are at least educated and knowledgeable about what happened and have the best opportunity possible to keep it from happening again.
아이고, 오셨습니까? 반갑습니다.
In the summer of 2007, Lee Susan finally shared her hidden past with her son.
对于这个慰安妇这个情况呢，就是我从书本上以前都知道，但是我从来没想到我母亲是慰安妇。在我母亲胸前，小时候我一直以为我母亲就是有骨质增生，是一种病的。这次我母亲回来了，跟我说这些事儿的时候，我才知道我母亲这个胸部都是日本人逃跑的时候，都是日本人强迫她，就是回去当慰安妇，给日本人施用那个酷刑给造成的。不为我母亲这段历史感到这个耻辱，相反，我为我母亲能够坚强的活到现在，能够控诉日本人，我感到骄傲。
Luo Shanshe, son of Wei Xiaolan, has recently written a letter to the Japanese government. During the China-Japan War, the Japanese army kidnapped my mother and forced her to serve as a comfort woman. There, she became pregnant and had me. We have been living all our life in agony caused by it. She does not have much time to live. I urge you to take a brisk action for the sake of humanity.
那国家的慰安妇呢，是怪日本人嘛？那服务是那欺负的嘛？那个怪他嘛？怪日本人去处生嘛？你这本来是去行的啦，不想讲啊，这个伤疤。 给他好了，本来跟着我拉一刀，要到日本人来负担我，养我这一辈子。
In Gwangju, Gyeonggi, Korea, stands the History Museum of Sexual Slavery by Japanese military. Many Japanese people visit this museum, which opened 10 years ago to use as a field history education and the sexual slavery system in World War II. Here, they all face a shameful history of their motherland, Japan. They may want to deny, but they perceive the truth by facing it straight. Many Japanese write letters of comfort and apology to the victims on behalf of their government. One Japanese student left the following letter on a victim's bed. My grandfather was a Japanese soldier during the wartime. I wonder how he must have felt while standing in line in front of the comfort station. You and my grandfather who met each other at a comfort station. That unfortunate, unknown encounter was instigated by a giant monster that benefited from the war. I hope our encounter would now shine the light of hope at our windows. I will be fighting to chase the monster. Tokugo Koga from Japan. So many victims have now passed away. Only a few left a photo. The majority drew the last lonely breath, leaving no photo, no flower, or no cry of pain behind. There are neither many victims nor much time left now. The women who appeared in this film will soon become only images too. They are the women whose flower-like youth were violated by war and who had to live the whole life in humiliation. They are 200,000 victims from 13 countries. They were from Korea, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Singapore and Malaysia, the Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea and East Timor, and Holland. Together with all the people around the globe who wish miserable wars and sexual slavery system to vanish, they are waiting for an apology from the Japanese government. The apology would not be only for these women. It would be essentially required for the world peace, including that of Japan.
일본은 매우 강한 힘을 가지고 있는 나라입니다. 근데 그 나라가 여전히 과거에 저지른 그러한 인권 침해의 범죄에 대해서 숨기려고 하고 인정하지 않고 교육하지 않고 그런 것은 대단한 평화를 위협하는 불안 요인이라고 생각을 합니다. 그리고 그 평화를 서로 같이 갖고 나갈 수가 없는 것인 거죠.
일본이 사죄를 해야 자기네들이 저지른 그 죄에서 자기네들이 해방이 되지요. 우리도 우리지만 할머니들이 한도 풀리지만 일본한테도 똑같이 자기네한테도 그게 그 죄에서 해방이 돼요.
Without a true apology from Japan, the war that should have ended for these women 63 years ago will only continue. We only wonder when this war will be over, liberating both the victims and offenders all together.